Good afternoon. I'm going to call to order our meeting of the Housing Policy and Development Committee. This is our regularly scheduled meeting for November 7th. I'm Cam Gordon. I'm chair of the committee, and I'm joined today by Vice Chair Jeremiah Ellison and Council Members Reich, Goodman, and Schrader. We're a quorum of the committee, so we can conduct our business. We actually have a rather extensive agenda with 13 items on it. We have 5 public hearings, but we also have a consent agenda, and I think I'm going to move the consent agenda forward first in case there are staff or others here who are for those items. I know that there's at least one item that somebody wants to pull. Councilmember Ellison.
I would like to pull item number 6 off consent for discussion.
All right. Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a quick question about item number 10. I can wait my turn, but if we could pull that off too, that'd be great.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and we'll move items 7, 8, and 9, and I'll let you know what those are. Item 7 is the decertification of Portland Place Tax Increment Financing District. Item 8 is approving the granting of exclusive development rights for development of 628 Franklin Avenue East to DIVINE or an affiliate. Item 9 is authorizing staff to continue the analysis of the Redwell proposal to determine if tax increment financing assistance is appropriate or justifiable. That's at 1000 3rd Street North. So on those, I will move those 3 items forward. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items carry. I'm not sure how long or how short this is going to take, but let's think that maybe it'll take not much time and we can move to our consent items too. Councilmember Ellison on item number 6.
Yeah, I have delved into this project a little bit. It's the Pinnacle Management. It's the approval of a waiver for payment of holding costs. And I would like to, knowing a little bit about the project, I feel like it doesn't really meet any kind of standard to receive any kind of like subsidy or fee waivers from the city, and would like to make a motion to deny any approval of any waiver for payment of holding costs.
Okay, then Councilmember Ellison has moved to not approve a waiver for payment of holding costs or deny approval of a waiver. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, then all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. That motion carries then. I should say all those opposed. That motion carries. And then I'll move on to item 10 for a quick question from Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You might remember from the last council meeting, there were a number of questions, and our colleague, Councilmember Cunningham, actually pulled off the agenda, and then I pulled him off the ledge, not selling a number of properties to Gimmick. And there were some concerns about Gimmick, and I'm just wondering, now we're putting them on another list here to be allowed to participate in the HOW program, yet the council member that has the most Gimmick houses has concerns about it, and I didn't, I sent him an email about it, but I didn't have an opportunity to talk to him, so I'm wondering if we shouldn't just simply pull Gimmick off the list and determine what to do between now and the council meeting.
Okay, do you have any feedback on that idea?
Hi, I'm Erica Coleman, Senior Project Coordinator with CPET Housing. And this is just asking for a staff recommendation for approval of HOW developers. This does not afford them any property. So if
That's my point. I don't think they should be on the list of approved developers. So, and that's coming from what just happened in the council meeting where I had a colleague not want to sell any properties to Gimmick, and it got so far along in the process that it came up in the council meeting. And thankfully, a mature man that he is decided, well, I'm not going to screw these 4 projects, but I have concerns. And so I'm just trying to get these concerns addressed prior to putting them on the list so we don't have a council member saying, I don't want these things happening at the council meeting.
How about if we move this forward without recommendation? That would give us some chance to talk.
Suggestion.
Yeah, and so that we can figure this out before the council meeting. I'll also note that some of the land sales Gimmick is involved with that we're going to be considering at the public hearing too.
I know.
So,
It's a worry.
yeah, okay. So on Councilmember Goodman's motion to move this forward without recommendation, any discussion? Seeing none, then all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. And that motion carries. Now we'll go back to our public hearings, and we're going to be first doing 4 land sales. I think maybe we'll take the first 2 separately and the second 2 together. And is Mr. Ramadan here to report? Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. We have our very first land sales, 1124 24th Avenue North. And this is the sale through the Minneapolis Homes Policies and Programs established by the City Council on December 11, 2015, and on February 10, 2017. The staff recommends the sale of 1124 24th Avenue North to Jenny Investments, LLC for its appraised value of $28,000, subject to conditions. If Jenny Investments, LLC fails to close, approving the sale of the property to PRG Incorporated for $28,000, subject to conditions. This property was acquired on October 27, 2017 from Hennepin County as tax forfeited land for $5,000. We marketed this to over 2,400 people, and this was the only offer, there were 7 applications received. Besides the 2 recommended, we also had CTW Group, Northeast Minneapolis Properties, LLC, Ladybug, LLC, Tyhan, and Top Property Solutions. However, Jenny Investments and PRG were the 2 highest ranked because of their greater experience and quality of completed projects. The purchaser proposes to invest $168,200 in private funds to rehab the property as a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, single-family home to be marketed exclusively to owner occupants. The alternate purchaser, that is PRG, proposes to access $274,000 in HOW funds to rehab the property as a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, single-family home with a detached new construction garage to be marketed exclusively to owner occupants. Notification was provided to the Jordan Jordan Area Community Council on July 13, 2018. The developer, Jenny Curry of Jenny Investments, is here today. I should just say that hopefully you all will have opportunity to meet with us sometime in the future. We had a very great open house tour of a couple of Jenny's properties earlier this fall that she acquired from the city in April and completed in less than 5 months. And so this is one of our superstars that we'd like you to get to know. Are there any questions for me?
I don't see any questions. Thank you so much for that report, and I'll open the public hearing, and maybe Jenny would like to come up and say hello and introduce yourself.
Hello, Mr. Chair. My name is Jennifer, and I'm the owner of Jenny Investments, and I'm also a general contractor with Amani Construction. This would be my 5th property working with Minneapolis, and I'm also building new construction. Thank you, and I look forward to working with you.
Well, wonderful, and I hope you noticed that you were called a superstar.
Thank you, Matthew.
Appreciate that. Anyone else want to speak about this? Seeing no one, then I'll close the public hearing, and I will move passage of the resolution approving the sale as recommended. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. And now we'll move on to our second land sale. This is at 2212 36th Avenue North to Top Property Solutions.
Mr. Chair, committee members, 2212 36th Avenue North, again, through the Minneapolis Homes Program on December 11, 2015 and February 10, 2017. We're recommending the sale of this property to Top Property Solutions for its appraised value of $20,000. And if they fail to close, to RLS Investments, LLC for $20,000 subject conditions. This property was acquired on July the 12th, 2017 from Hennepin County as tax forfeited land for $1. Again, it was marketed to over 2,400, and we received 3 applications. The other 2 were, besides Top Property and RLS Investments, we also received an application from CTW Group. The purchaser proposes to invest $118,471 to rehab this property as a 5-bedroom, 3-bath, single-family home with a detached garage. And the alternate purchaser proposes to invest $85,400 to rehab it as a 4-bedroom, 1.5-bathroom, single-family home with a detached garage. Notification was provided to the Cleveland Neighborhood Association on July 13th. Although the neighborhood supported the RLS investment, staff felt that the property, which is presently an illegal duplex, the scope of work that Top Properties provided seemed to be more appropriate to making this conform to being a single-family house again. And so that was the reason for our recommendation differing from the neighborhood recommendation. I didn't see Harold Green from Top Property Solutions here today, but are there any questions of me?
I don't see any questions on this one. Thank you. I'll open the public hearing then, in case somebody is here who would like to speak to this. Step forward, please. Seeing no one stepping forward, I will close the public hearing, and I will move forward the staff recommendation to sell the property to Top Property Solutions. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. And now maybe we can hear about the two land sales to the Greater Metropolitan Housing Corporation, one at 3518 Emerson and the other at 3547 Humboldt.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we have 3518 Emerson and, as you mentioned, 3547 Humboldt. We're recommending the sale of these properties to Greater Metropolitan Housing Corporation, also known as Gimmick, for their appraised values of $7,500 each. The staff has marketed these properties, and these are actually the only offers that we received for these properties. I should note that the purchaser, that is Gimmick, secured $4 million in New Markets tax credits to invest in building 10 new single-family homes to be marketed exclusively to owner-occupants. To make these homes more affordable, that $4 million also represents approximately $800,000 in development gap assistance, which is approximately $70,000 per home as a write-down to make these houses more affordable to owner-occupants. And also, there is no direct assistance from the city of Minneapolis in these projects. Notification was provided to the Fowler Neighborhood Association August 6th, and I believe Eden Spencer is here today with us. Are there any questions that you have of me?
I don't have any questions, and unless you know anything about the concerns that we have heard, I think we heard a few concerns last time we did a
Yes.
land sale, and I know that we just heard Councilmember Goodman talking about Council Cunningham having some concerns. Do you know what those are about?
I'm not aware of Councilmember Cunningham's concerns, but the concerns that were raised last time, we actually had an opportunity to talk with that neighborhood resident who was fortunate enough to get a home through the city of Minneapolis, our Green Homes North, which was a highly insulated and highly energy efficient home. It's cost prohibitive to do that too much. And what, as I mentioned earlier, Gimmick spends way more on these houses than they actually are able to sell these houses for in North Minneapolis. So we do, the end product is not as highly efficiently energy efficient, but we do ask them, and they do work with us to make sure that they meet, higher standards than just an ordinary construction.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Goodman has a question.
Not a question, but I just wanted to note I did have an opportunity to talk to Councilmember Cunningham, and his concern was not why one home was net zero and another was not. His concern is that he feels that the quality of construction with regard to these homes will not stand a long period of time. And he feels like, probably rightfully so, that North Minneapolis is getting their fair share of homes that are not going to stand the test of time. And he can point out problems he sees with Gimmick homes. And in fact, he's brought to the attention of some people in code compliance problems with some of these homes. So I don't know that because I don't have any Gimmick homes in my ward, so I can only translate what I heard from him. He did not say to me, and don't approve another land sale to Gimmick. So I don't have any intention of doing that today, but I do think that we probably need to get the folks at Gimmick together with our housing staff to talk about this because, it's a fresh set of eyes, a new council member who sees things potentially differently and probably with a much more positive, proactive lens that we're not desperate, we don't have to take anything in North Minneapolis, and I admire that and respect it. He also, like I said, didn't stand in the way of the last land sale that required an early signing, so that actually meant it was important to someone. But I think going forward, we have to think about that, and I think it would be worth someone talking to him. It wouldn't be right for me to have had this conversation, not bring it up today.
Councilmember Goodman, just an anecdotal note for all the council members. In 1982, I had the opportunity to purchase my first home through Gimmick, and it has held up for the test of time. It's still energy efficient after more than 35 years. So we appreciate the opportunity that we had to work with Gimmick all those years ago.
And to be fair, it wasn't an energy efficiency issue. So I think you should probably talk to him about it.
All right.
He would tell you can point out the Gimmick home on any block in the city, and I bet he's right.
Oh, yes, you can. Yeah. All right.
Well, thank you very much. I'll open the public hearing, and if you want to come forward and introduce yourself and respond to
I
some
am
of this.
Mary Lind, and I spoke on behalf of the Fall Neighborhood last time this came around, along with my co-committee member for the Housing Committee, Kitty Stratton. She couldn't be here today. She's in New York. And but I think the biggest thing is that we want to work with Gimmick. We share Philippe Cunningham's, Councilman's concern just about the minimum standards that are being used to build houses in Minneapolis. We want the opportunity to sit at the table. Going to the Fowle neighborhood, I heard him mention that they approached the Fowle Neighborhood Association in August 6th, and at that time, I know they were willing to work with Gimmick, and we're not against it either. Kitty is very knowledgeable on homes and building in a way that makes it affordable for the utilities and good construction, and we're just looking forward to being able to sit on that decision and working with Gimmick to build the homes and not, have good product built in our neighborhood.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Eden Spencer with Gimmick, and I just wanted to thank you guys for taking this and just mention that we definitely want to work with staff and the council member and the Fallwell neighborhood residents in order to work to make a better house and an even longer lasting house for North Minneapolis. The new market tax credits that we received, we closed on them September 17th, 2018, and we have 1 calendar year to spend that money, the $4 million, which is partly why we approached the city about buying 10 lots, and we did have many conversations with Kitty Stratton this summer. That was the person who was here at the last meeting, who's not here now, and definitely recognized her concerns and want to continue this conversation. It's just really hard to implement at this time, but for all of our future projects, we definitely want to figure out a way to make our houses better, and we will work with the staff, the council member, and the neighborhood residents to do so.
Well, I appreciate that. Hopefully you can reach out to him in the next few days too, so that there can be some conversations. Anybody else here to speak on this matter? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Any comments or questions? I'll move forward the staff recommendation for the 2 land sales, 3518 Emerson and 3547 Humboldt Avenues North, to Greater Metropolitan Housing Corporation. Discussion on that. Councilmember Ellison.
I do just want to urge both Gimmick and staff and some of the folks from Fallwell who are here to maybe connect with Councilmember Cunningham. I've also, before next council meeting, I've also heard some of his concerns, and I know that we get a lot flying at us as new council members, as council members, period, and I don't want him sitting in another council meeting feeling like a little blindsided by this kind of flying through committee. He's not on the committee, and so it would be good for him to walk into that next council meeting feeling like he's been able to have a real conversation with you all about these land sales, because he's trying to represent we're all trying to represent our wards as best as we can. So that's it.
I think that's a good point too. We also remember item 10, which we moved forward without recommendation, in large part because of, I guess the Gimmick is also included on the list there, so that'll be really important that we try to resolve that. And I'll take it upon myself to make sure to reach out to Councilmember Cunningham and let him know this is coming forward. Any other discussion on the motion? And all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. That motion passes then, and that moves us to our final public hearing of the meeting, and this is on the modifications to 10 tax increment financing plans. And this is to increase the tax increment financing budgets for affordable housing. welcome.
Yep, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. I'm Mark Winkelhaith, the Director of Development Finance in the Finance Department. As all of you are aware, tax increment financing in the state of Minnesota is governed by state statute, and specifically what's known as the TIF Act. The TIF Act requires that most of the tax increment that's generated by TIF districts must be spent within the geographic boundaries of the TIF district. However, a certain portion can be spent outside the boundaries under certain restrictions. That's typically referred to as TIF pooling. One of the eligible costs outside the TIF district is affordable rental housing projects located anywhere in the city. Over the life of a typical TIF district, the amount that can be pooled outside the boundaries of the TIF district is generally about 35% over the lifetime of the district. Since 2011, the City Council has been pooling TIF for affordable housing projects, roughly $2 to $3 million per year, and that has gone through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. This has come from a small collection of TIF districts, and the money is actually appropriated through the city's normal budget process. From 2011 to 2018, just under $19 million in TIF was pooled to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and awarded to various projects. Now, the city's consolidated TIF district, this is the city's largest TIF district, was established by special legislation passed back in 2008, and it does not, it's not subject to the normal restrictions. This particular TIF district has 4 eligible uses of its tax increment. The 4 eligible uses are as follows. The first is that the city must reimburse or send back about 1/3 of the increment to the county. It's their portion, and the county really is not participating in this particular TIF district. The second eligible use is administrative costs, city and county administrative costs, a relatively small amount. What's left is needs to be spent in 2 major categories. This was the impetus behind the special legislation. The first of which is target center debt service, and the second of which is neighborhood revitalization purposes. Now, target center debt service refers to debt service, principal and interest payments on the 2009 target center refunding bonds that refunded the original acquisition of the building. This is not the more current target center bonds for the renovation. So this is for the old bonds. And currently there's about $36 million of outstanding 2009 target center bonds. The second category, neighborhood revitalization purposes, is not defined in the special legislation. So therefore it's up to the city council to define what that means. From 2011 to 2016, the City Council defined that term to be operations and programs of NCR. And so that's where a certain amount of money went during that time period. Then in 2017, the City Council expanded the definition to include a little over $9 million in NRP repayments that went back to neighborhoods. More recently, the definition has been expanded to include about $1 million for the Navigation Center. That was last month. And the attached resolution here expands the definition further to include programs designed to alleviate the shortage of housing for persons of low and moderate income anywhere in the city. So basically affordable housing. City finance staff recently updated our projections of tax increment that could be available for affordable housing in 2019 through 2027. We looked at 12 different TIF districts that had some capacity, and 10 of those districts need to have their TIF plans modified. Those are the 10 modifications that are attached to the RCA. I think the easiest way to summarize these 10 modifications is if you pull up Exhibit B to the RCA, and I'll walk you through that real quickly. That should be the first. Do you have access to that, or?
I
Yes.
wonder if you could put it on the,
Yeah, I don't have it handy. You do that? Pardon? Exhibit B, yeah. It's the first attachment, so.
is that the right one?
Yeah, it's a little hard to read there, but I'll try to walk you through it. So listed down the left is the 10 TIF districts that are being modified.
We also have it right in front of us on our.
I'm just going to say,
screen.
do you have it in front of
We
you?
can see it
Okay,
better
all right,
than
I
we
wasn't sure if you
probably
did or not, so. Yeah, the first column of numbers is the current maximum amount in the TIF budget, and this is just for affordable housing. So that totals, as you can see, 22.7 million approximately. The next column shows the increase in the TIF budget for affordable housing. So here's what we're adding to each of them. A total of $57.2 million. And you'll notice the amount that's being added varies from a very small number, 131,000, all the way up to very large. The largest number is 20.9 million for the consolidated TIF district. And I'm going to come back and explain where that number came from in just a second. Let me walk through the rest of the table. So the next column is the revised maximum amount, $79.9 million, just about 80 million. Then the next column shows how much has previously been appropriated. So that money has been allocated and awarded to various projects. And then the last column shows you the potential future appropriations that might be made in 2019 through 2027, that 9-year period, if this increment that we are projecting actually materializes. So let me go back to the 20.9 million from the consolidated TIF district. I probably should have put a little bit more detail on the RC. I apologize for that, but let me explain that in more detail. For many years, the city was under the understanding that there was a cap on the amount of tax increment that could be generated by this district. And it was pursuant to a memorandum of understanding that we have with Hennepin County. That number, 180 million, 180,000, appears in the document. And the TIF budget is built on that number, the current TIF budget. However, this summer, a memo from the county attorney's office indicated that they had interpreted the MOU to mean the cap only applied if the city had expanded the boundaries of the TIF district. And we have not done that, and we have no plans to do that. So they concluded the cap did not apply. And staff in the city attorney's office has conferred that that's their opinion as well. So we reran the projections, and we came up with an additional $51 million that we think can be generated by this district. It was going to be potentially hitting the cap in mid-2019, and now if we can collect all the way to the end of 2020, $59 million more, or $51 million more, excuse me. Now remember, we have to return a third of that back to the county and pay some little administrative costs. So really the net number is approximately 34 million. So that's what we're sort of dealing with. And then the question becomes, how does the council want to split $34 million between the two remaining categories, which are target center debt service and neighborhood revitalization purposes? So in this particular modification, the city finance department is recommending that of that total, $13 million be allocated to target center debt service. That's what would be needed to pay those bonds off entirely. And then at that point, there would be no need for a city levy, for instance, starting in 2021, 22, 23, for that particular bond issue, which extends out beyond 2020. So if you take 34 million and we're going to allocate 13 of it, That's approximately 38% of it to target center debt service. That leaves the other 62%, or $20.9 million, for neighborhood revitalization purposes. And the mayor wishes to have the $20.9 million earmarked in the subcategory of affordable housing. So hopefully that makes sense. Then I would just mention a couple other things. As I mentioned previously, these modifications do not appropriate any money for affordable housing. These are maximum numbers. As TIF materializes in the future years, money will be appropriated for affordable housing or any of the other eligible purposes through the normal city budget process. And then I'd also like to end just by mentioning that we received comments on these modifications from 4 neighborhood groups: the Elliott Park Neighborhood Incorporated, East Calhoun Community Organization, Cedar Isles Dean Neighborhood Association, and Citizens for a Loring Park Community. And I believe those letters and emails were forwarded to all of you. Mr. Chair, I think that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So 3 of the 4 of those are in the ward that I represent. So I want to have you help me clarify for the record some of the points. One of the SIDNA comments was that we could just not pay back the Target Center bonds. And my understanding from communicating with Mr. Ruff is, well, we could do that. Then we'll just have to increase the property tax levy to pay off those bonds. So I just want you to clarify whether or not that's true.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Goodman, that is correct.
So I just want to lay out there that the bonds have to be paid off one way or another. It's either through this source or we can increase taxes more to pay off those bonds. I probably would side with using this money to pay off those bonds since that's the purpose of it. But it is true that 100% of the $20 million could be spent on neighborhoods.
Goodman, it could be used for whatever the council decides it to be used.
But this
for.
action, is it just simply taking the action to recertify these bonds or making the modifications, or is it also allocating the $20 million, $20.1 million to 100% to affordable housing and nothing to neighborhoods and neighborhood groups?
It's putting, the $20.9 million under the category of affordable housing.
So I just
yes.
want to make sure everyone knows that, because I think the neighbors have been bringing this up, neighborhoods have been bringing this up, and we've kind of ignored that what they're saying, there's some truth to it, and there is some truth to it. It's about making a choice, not about half the money for one and half the money for the other, or some of the money for some of it and some for the other. This is 100% of the money that the neighborhoods believed was to be used for neighborhood-related purposes is now being redirected towards affordable housing. I'm not making a comment about whether or not we should or shouldn't do it, but I just want to make sure we put out there, making this decision today is not spending this money on neighborhoods and neighborhood organizations.
So that's not exactly what I read in the staff report that says these modifications do not appropriate any future TIF revenue for affordable housing. As TI revenue becomes available in future years, these funds may be appropriated by the City Council to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund or other eligible affordable housing programs through the normal city budget process each year.
Right, it's not allocating a money to the Lake Street Affordable Housing Project, but it's putting the money into affordable housing as a decision, not neighborhoods.
So I think it's saying we will now make affordable housing an allowable use for these funds. Could you just clarify?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, what it's doing is redefining what neighborhood revitalization purposes means. It's expanding it to include affordable housing. And then in the budget, it is allocating in the budget. Remember, this is a not to exceed number. It's not an appropriation, but it's saying if it materializes, the plan has authorized $20.9 million for affordable housing. Now, if during the normal budget process, the City Council decides they want to use it for a different purpose, they can at that point change the definition of neighborhood revitalization purposes, expand it, and they could move some of the $20.9 million into a different category, with a simple amendment to the TIF plan and use it for other eligible purposes.
Mr. Chair,
Does that
Mr.
help?
Winkelhake,
Yep.
a simple amendment to the TIF plan isn't like we can just bring it up in a regular meeting that's not noticed and sent out, is it? And the reason we're here today and we're in a public hearing and why everyone else got a 45-day review is because we're making a modification to the TIF plan. Isn't that what we would have to go through in order to make a different change?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Goodman, if you're increasing the budget, the total budget, you have to go through the whole public hearing and notification process. If you're just moving a line item from one to another, that can be done with a simple RCA.
Through the council process?
Through the
So
council
like
process, yes.
3 weeks, 4 weeks?
Right.
Something like that?
Yeah.
Councilmember Reich.
Thank you. And just for clarification, the neighborhood purposes, as we've defined them through our NCR, et cetera, that wouldn't need an amendment because it's already a pre-existing approved allocation.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Reich, that's correct.
So it would be some other yet-to-be-contemplated definition, which no one's even discussing or been brought up in conversation, but theoretically, if we were to go there, those parameters would need to be addressed through the process that you just described. But current activities that, as we understand them, would not need to be changed. And just to reinforce Chairman Gordon's point, this is not an allocation per se. It is an enabling statement, period.
Yeah, it is, correct, yes. And I should just, further clarify, if I haven't already, that none of these actions change the existing definition or the existing purposes as NCR, number one, NRP repayments, number two. Those are obligations that are being shown going out through 2020, so it doesn't change that.
Right.
This is just dealing with this additional revenue that we have, discovered, you might say.
But to reinforce what Councilmember Goodman has stated, you don't take these actions if there aren't intentions, and there's already intentions on the books in terms of its use. So we should be aware of that intention is very clearly outlined as well, which would be the either or that has been raised by Councilmember Goodman and her constituents.
Councilmember Schrader.
Just have a question. Can we hold off on making that expansion until we're actually talking about the allocation of money? It sounds like I'm hearing we could, just because the neighborhoods are meeting right now. They're coming up with their neighborhoods 2020 plan. It's a little premature. I think they'd be very nervous that even if this isn't an allocation of money, that it is being, the definition is expanded and could go that way.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Schroeder, I think you could, but not for very long, though. In the 2019 mayor's proposed budget is $10.6 million in TIF from the consolidated TIF district. So this plan amendment that allows for some amount of affordable housing really needs to go through before that budget is approved. Now, it doesn't have to be the entire $20.9 million, but it has to be at least, presumably, 10.6.
So I also wanted to just encourage folks to look at Exhibit 4. So there's another kind of spreadsheet in there that's just about the Consolidated Redevelopment TIF District, and it makes really clear, I think, in that spreadsheet that the fund is going to maintain $50 million for NCR operations, or that's the total from 2011 on, so it doesn't actually break it up, but also the NRP repayments, which you talked about earlier, so that our commitments, we'll still make our commitments we've presently made to ourselves for what the uses are now, and this will be additional revenues that we're now trying to be more flexible with to allow to be spent also on affordable housing.
Correct.
Councilmember Goodman.
Mr. Chair, Mark, can you put the chart back up of chart B just for me? Exhibit B.
There it is. We can see it now.
Perfect. So under the headings, it says increase in TIF budget, but that really means diversion from the general fund, right? Because basically, the increase in the TIF budget comes from somewhere. And so we're not really increasing a budget with money we don't have. That's really money that's not going back into the general pot of money where all the jurisdictions get money to do what they do, like schools and parks and those guys. So is that correct? Or is this actually like really found money that wouldn't be going otherwise back into the tax base because we're recertifying this?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Goodman, if we were still subject to the cap and we didn't have this additional money, what would have happened is part of the way through 2019, we would have hit the cap. The TIP district would have put money aside to continue to fund NCR and the NRP repayments through 2020, but we would have had to decertify the district, and so all the property value in the consolidated district would come back onto the city's tax base.
Right.
And the county's tax base and the school district's tax base. And what, each of those jurisdictions decided to do with that tax base, would be in question then. So, but yes, the city could, if it chose, then levy against that additional value, but it would get only the city's piece, whereas if you keep it in the TIP district, you get the city's piece, the school district's piece, all the other taxing jurisdictions with the exception of the county, which we return their funds. Does that help? Okay.
Councilmember Reich.
Just a comment moving forward, and I just use this historical example for illustrative purpose, not to say it's recommendable, but these two initiatives are not necessarily, or uses are not necessarily incompatible. As a matter of fact, NRP had to set aside through its own program with community groups specifically identified for affordable housing, and I just know in my own ward some great projects happen through that process. So again, not recommending that specific direction, but just knowing that these things aren't necessarily incompatible and could be thoughtfully integrated moving forward, just as a thought process. So thanks for indulging, Mr. Chair.
I'll just note that I'm intrigued by that concept myself, so I appreciate you bringing that up. I don't see any other questions or comments up here. We have to have our public hearing for this before we can vote on it, and I'm hoping that maybe some people came to speak to us about this. So I'm going to open the public hearing and invite anyone who would like to come forward to talk about the tax increment financing plan modifications. Well, maybe committee members covered it well, I guess, and the report was so excellent that we don't have any comments. We did get those letters, and I think they were very useful and informative, and I appreciated that. All right. Is there any, then I'll close the public hearing. Is there any other discussion on this? I'm prepared to move the staff recommendation. So on that motion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. That motion carries. And then we'll move on to our two discussion items. Or actually, maybe it's three discussion items. Sorry. The first is approving a preliminary reservation of the 2019 low-income housing tax credits. And it looks like Ms. Gildem's here to present. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Gordon. Committee members, I am Angie Skildum. I'm with the CPED Housing Residential Finance Group, and I'm here today to present this year's recommendations for allocation of 9% low-income housing tax credits in the city of Minneapolis. Ordinarily, our new tax credit program coordinator, Amy Geisler, would be here for this presentation, but she had, unfortunately, a family matter she had to attend to, so I'm going to step in and help keep this important process moving forward. As you know, the 9% Housing Tax Credit Program is a federal program administered by the IRS, which provides a reduction in federal tax liability to investors in qualified low-income rental housing. Investors receive an annual credit for 10 years, and in exchange for that, they make an equity investment that roughly equates to 70% of the project's total development cost. These projects must comply with the federally imposed rent and income restrictions for a minimum of 30 years. The first step in this annual allocation process is the adoption of our Qualified Allocation Plan, or QAP, and our Tax Credit Procedural Manual, which establish project priorities and scoring criteria for this program. These documents went through a community review period and a public hearing last spring and were adopted by the City Council last June. This is a highly competitive process. This year, the city has just over $1.5 million in 9% tax credits available, and we received 7 applications requesting a total of $6.8 million in credits. The applications were reviewed and scored according to the qualified allocation plan I just mentioned for this year, and the scoring results are included as an attachment to your report. The top scoring project this year is Maya Commons, which received a partial allocation in the last year's round and is recommended to receive the remaining $587,103 in credits that they need to proceed to construction. The second highest scoring project this year was Lydia Apartments, which last week received an allocation of housing infrastructure bonds from Minnesota Housing, which means that they no longer need the 9% tax credit in order to proceed. The third highest scoring project is Amber Apartments, which is recommended to receive the balance of this year's allocation of $983,475 in credits, and that will position them to receive the balance of their needed credits in next year's rounds. Both of the recommended projects are summarized in the report and attachments, and I can answer any questions that the committee may have.
Maybe I'll ask a question about the Paris development project. I know that they scored below Amber. They also got Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars. I'm wondering what they or the other projects could do to position themselves next year, or I'm assuming that the Paris Affordable Housing Trust Fund money isn't going to be enough to complete the financing for that entire project, I guess. And I guess I'm wondering if you would have any recommendations or suggestions for how they could come back next year. And I think they have some concern that they didn't get any tax credits this year, that somehow that's going to put them out of it's going to hurt them next time. And I'd like you to say yes or no if that's true.
Okay. A couple, so I'll take that question first because it's freshest in my mind. There are no scoring criteria in the QAP scoring that relate to whether there is or is not an existing allocation of credits. So that does not affect, a partial allocation does not affect your future allocations one way or another. As it pertains to scoring in general, this is a very transparent process. We publish all of the scoring criteria and we publish all of the scores that each of the projects that come in receive on an annual basis. We try to be very transparent about that. We are, as you mentioned, very supportive of the Paris project, and when my colleague Carrie comes up next and talks about the trust fund recommendations, you will see that we are recommending their full award for the trust funds in this round. And we, of course, always try to make ourselves available to work with any applicant about strengthening their projects on a year-to-year basis. As I mentioned, this is a highly competitive process, and we don't always know what's going to come in from year to year. So we do the best that we can to give the best advice that we can, and it really just depends on how many different priorities a project hits in terms of what their overall scoring capacity is from year to year.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking a little time to give some feedback on that. Are there any other questions or comments on the report? Yes, Councilman Bright.
Thank you. And I know we try to have some consistency with state as a large allocator. Do they have any sort of favoritism for a few dollars in the queue, or is our policy consistent with their policy in terms of that notion of having a foot in the door, so to speak?
Chair Gordon, Councilmember Reich, I would have to go back and study the state's qualified allocation plan, but I don't believe that they do.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just because I'm chair of the committee doesn't mean I have to make all the motions, but Councilmember Goodman. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move approval of the staff recommendation. I would like to make a couple of comments on it. The Paris project is in my ward, as is the Lydia project is in my ward, and I would have liked to have seen all the projects in my ward get funding, but we don't have enough money to be able to do that. And I wish we did, but we don't. There were 6 projects on the 9% list, and 2 could get funded. The other thing I just want to point out is, unlike the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, where there's probably some leeway for council members to weigh in and make some changes in the outcome. The QAP is a federal guideline that we join in with the city of St. Paul in approving, and we don't have the ability actually to manipulate the QAP process. The score is the score. And we can't come in and say, we'll give them more points here, give them less points here, or give this group money and don't give this other group money. We're following federal guidelines. I have not really known a time when an applicant that didn't get 9% tax credits actually suggests that we should stop our process to give them more time to lobby us to knock a different project off or give a different project less resources so they can get more. So I feel like this is an extremely competitive process. Everyone knows that when they get into the queue. That's why we encourage people to go for bonds and 4% tax credits and not be in the 9% tax credit queue. But this project, it's more than half of their funding. So if they don't get 9% tax credits, they can't do the project. And so they don't have any other funding. That's part of the problem with their project too, is that they don't have multiple sources. So I think the staff have made the legal decision here to follow our QAP, and for that reason, I'm moving the staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. Then on Councilmember Goodman's motion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Now we'll move on to our 12th item on the agenda, and this is the 2018 Affordable Housing Trust Fund awards and the pipeline award as well. Okay, welcome, Ms. Goldberg.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Carrie Goldberg with the CPED Multifamily Residential Finance Division, and I'm very pleased to be before you today to present this year's Affordable Housing Trust Fund Award recommendations. Just a quick reminder, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund provides gap financing for multifamily projects with 10 units or more. Projects are structured as deferred loans with affordability in place for 30 years. The maximum award is the lower of $25,000 per affordable unit, or 15% of the total development cost, whichever is less. And in 2018, 50% of the area median income for a family of four is $47,150. From 2003 through the end of 2017, the trust fund has helped produce almost 8,000 housing units, of which approximately close to 5,000 were affordable to households at or below 50% of the area median income. The Senior Housing Initiative sets aside 30% of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund budget for projects that are creating 35 units or more in each ward by 2025. Wards that have met this goal are 2, 3, 6, 8, and 9. And today we are recommending an award for a project called the Rains Building in Ward 10. And this is an adaptive reuse project providing 89 new units for affordable senior housing. Staff is then recommending that the remaining senior set aside be allocated to the remaining trust fund project awards before you today. Just briefly, this is a map that shows the locations of the projects that are being recommended before you today. This year, the city received 16 applications seeking a total of $23 million. All of the applications were reviewed and evaluated using the established trust fund underwriting standards and criteria. It is important to note that score is one component of the evaluation, so lower ranking projects may be funded over higher ranking projects based on preservation priorities, project readiness, other criteria that are stated in the RFP, such as the senior housing policy set aside, financial feasibility, whether they have support services plans, compliance with design guidelines, and the ability to secure funding from other funders. This year, for 2018, the trust fund has approximately $10.6 million available for this year's rounds of projects. The budget consists of 4 sources, which is CDBG, home, local funds, and any funds that may have been relinquished this year. And staff is recommending 8 awards totaling the entire amount of $10.6 million. This will not leave any funds available for a pipeline process until additional funds are budgeted during the annual budget review. The 8 projects being recommended are $1,950,000 for the preservation and construction of Lydia Apartments, $625,000 for the preservation of Prosperity Village, $2,750,000 for the construction of Northside Art Space lofts, a supplemental award of $465,500 for the construction of the Paris development, $1 million for the Rains building project, $2,375,000 for the construction of Lake Street Apartments, $700,000 for the construction of Gateway Northeast, and we did have one pipeline application come in for $775,000 for the construction of Penn Avenue, and that is the remaining award needed to close that project before the end of the year. I have just a quick few noteworthy deliverables I'll mention before I conclude. Projects in this round will create or preserve 633 units, of which 568 are new construction and 65 are stabilization or preservation units. We are creating or preserving 99 project-based Section 8 assisted units. And finally, 46% of the total units being developed by these 8 recommended projects will be affordable to residents at incomes of 50% or below AMI, including 17% at 30% AMI or below. All 8 projects are summarized in the report before you today, so I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time or go over any further details on some of the recommended projects.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that report. I also appreciate all the work that goes into this annual process and that you went through and working on all the projects and assessing them and your team. I'm sure it wasn't you alone, but I think you were definitely leading the effort. Thank you. I don't see any questions. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to move approval of the staff recommendation. I'd like to speak to it briefly, if I could.
Excellent. Thank you.
There are 2 projects in the ward that I represent that I'm extremely excited about. We talked about both of them earlier, Paris Apartments as well as Lydia Apartments. Lydia is the first affordable housing project I worked on when I first came to the city council 20 years ago, where neighbors had signs up all over the neighborhood saying, anyone but Lisa, we're not going to have this affordable housing in our neighborhood. Yet Beacon Housing persisted and built about 40 units of affordable housing in a former nursing home, which has become so successful that the neighborhood was asking them to do more, and the neighborhood is supporting another 38 units on that site, as well as a rehab of the existing units on that site. It's really exciting. I'll note also with the Paris project, the neighborhood association is supporting that as well. And just with a few site plan issues still to be worked out, but has strong support in the neighborhood, and I'm glad to see it got a trust fund recommendation today. But the project that I probably worked the most on, and the one that I think is the most important, and I know the staff knows this, is what I would call Art Space Leaf, which they're now calling something totally different, Art Space Northside Housing. This is a transformational project in the Harrison neighborhood, which is right almost on the border of Harrison and Bryn Mawr. Both Councilmember Ellison and I live within a handful of blocks of this site. And I think this is a former industrial site that has pollution remediation issues and is just on the brink of really helping turn this part of town around. Bassett Creek potentially could be daylighted. This project could result in the elimination of a massive amount of trucking that is immediately on the creek itself. It's bringing in juxtaposition arts to have a really cool space within the project. There is also a good amount of commercial associated with this project, larger units for families, and we just found out today there'll be some project-based Section 8 units as well. So everything has really come together. This is the culmination of a massive amount of work by Art Space Projects and Wellington, as well as the city staff, who have really worked hard to make this happen. It's taken upwards of, I think, 3 years now, and multiple council members and mayors to see this happen. So it feels like this is really the time that this project's going to move forward. The site is already under construction on the commercial portion of the site, so I'm really excited about it. Affordable housing can be transformational in neighborhoods. This project is one of those. So thank you for everyone's support of it.
Wonderful. Seeing no further comments then, all those in favor of Councilmember Goodman's motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries, and thanks everybody who came for that item and for all the work that you do. We couldn't invest in affordable housing like we do without our community partners. Now we'll go to our last item on the agenda, which is authorizing staff to continue the analysis of the Portland at 3rd Apartments.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. The recommendation I brought to you today is to authorize staff to complete the analysis needed to determine if tax increment financing, or TIF, is needed to fill the affordability gap in the Third at Portland Apartments affordable housing project. To give you a sense of where we're talking, technical assistance. Oh, there it is. It's up there. Oh, wow, and it's actually clear. Great. The project site there is identified in red. It's the block bordered between Washington and 3rd, and then 5th and Portland. And there's the one notch there at Washington and 5th that you'll notice will remain as is today, and the remainder of the site is a part of the larger redevelopment that Sherman and Associates is undertaking on this large block downtown. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the public benefits from the 4 different main components of this project. And so here, I keep forgetting, here's a site plan of just this red portion. There we go. All right, so you won't be able to read the notations there of what each of those colored blocks are, but
We can actually read them up here.
Oh,
That's
perfect, great. So I'll kind of walk you through those, as well as noting the public benefits of the various different components. So first, I start with the affordable housing. There'll be 90 units of affordable housing in the 6-story building that is wrapping the public parking ramp, and that is it's centered at the corner of Portland and 3rd, and will wrap the parking ramp on 3 sides, Portland, 3rd, and 5th. Sherman was also notified just recently that they will have 18 project-based Section 8 units in this 90-unit affordable housing project. In the report in front of you, it said that that they had 10, and they have now been awarded 18 of those. The second component that I'm going to talk about is today the current Minneapolis Fire Department Station 1 is at the corner of Portland and 3rd. They will be receiving a new facility, and that is the pink on the corner of 5th and 3rd. It'll be a 2-story building with 20,000 square feet, and that'll include the apparatus bays. They'll be able to increase their capacity from just having a single engine at their current station to having an engine, a ladder truck, as well as an ambulance. So they'll be able to increase their services as they're as they're seeing the need for increased runs from this station out of downtown. The next piece I'll note is at the corner of Portland and Washington, there's going to be a market rate tower that'll have over 225 market rate housing units. And then there's in the center is the parking ramp that's wrapped with either the fire station or affordable housing around it. All said, there will be 530,000 square feet of new development, not including any of the parking facilities on this block, which today, as we've noted, or as we can see, is a surface parking lot. So there are a lot of things going on. It's a complicated project. This portion for today is strictly for staff to have authorization to do the analysis needed to determine what the affordability gap is and if TIF will work for a funding source for that. The market rate tower would be within the TIF district boundaries, but would not receive any of the increment. But by allowing that to be within the TIF district, you have enough increment for enough increment to service a loan for the affordable housing portion. Additionally, early analysis indicates there may be the possibility for some pooling of additional increment, but we will find that out when we've completed the analysis. If approved today, staff will return to council with the completed analysis and provide a recommendation on TIF as a source in the TIF district if approved. You might notice that this is a bit different than some of the others in that if TIF is approved for this project, it will largely negate the need for a large capital stack, which is what we see in most of our typical affordable housing projects. So we're coming forward at the beginning at an earlier stage than you may otherwise see in TIF projects, and it will limit the time frame required in order to get the project going and limit the need for other additional affordable housing sources. There are a variety of folks here from the Sherman team today that are here to answer any questions, as am I. So with that, I am here for questions.
Well, thank you very much for that excellent report and those visuals. I don't see any questions. So I think everybody is comfortable based on the presentation. And I'm happy to move this to go forward with our project analysis authorization for this to continue, and also authorizing staff to negotiate the terms and conditions of a redevelopment contract with Sherman Associates or an affiliated entity to prepare the redevelopment and TIF plans for the project, subject to our final future approval. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, then all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. And that concludes our business for today. Thank you, everyone, for being here and for your participation. This meeting is adjourned.